Okay, it's December 22nd. This is Marcus Widener, and I'm here with Kristen Curé. Is that
Curé.
correct?
Yeah.
Curé,
Curé.
um, who works in Springfield at the library. And to start with, state your name, the community where you live, where and when you were born.
Okay. Good morning. My name is Kristen Curé. I live in Springfield, Oregon, and I was born in Phoenix, Arizona in 1980.
1980. Okay. And how long have you lived in Springfield now?
Uh, 10 years. I'm
10
going
years.
on my 11th now.
Okay.
Yeah.
And tell me
Well,
about. Mhm,
when I first moved, I was commuting from Corvallis. So
mhm.
it will actually living, so working in Springfield, going on my 11th year, actually living in Springfield would be 10 years in June.
Okay.
Not
And tell me about your job, where you're currently employed.
So I work at the Springfield Public Library and I'm the Latino liaison and Spanish services librarian there. And I guess so I've had pretty much the same title the whole time I've been here, but um our work is pretty fluid, and as people retire or people leave, sometimes exactly what we do. We might reassign certain assignments. And uh so like certain bits of my task have changed over the time that I've been here. I guess what do you want me to like go into what it's
Yeah,
like?
let's talk a little bit about your work. We'll,
Yeah,
we'll
so
talk, we'll maybe talk in detail. Well, actually, that's a good introduction. Let's do a few other things, and then we're going to come
okay,
back
okay.
to that in detail. So, and what led you to enter library work, or specifically the Latinx liaison work? Or is one of those like the driving force in your career, or are they all combined, or have they always been like that, or how?
I would say it's probably combined. I so my bachelor's degree was in Spanish, with a focus on literature, and I growing up in Arizona and living in southern Arizona, um, just being able to speak Spanish to serve Spanish speaking people in the community and be a part of that community has just
Mhm.
been part of my career. I came to libraries because I worked for a few years in social work related, like some kind of social work adjacent organizations,
Mhm.
both abroad and in the US. And um, in that work, it was really clear, because, well, I guess to go back, I grew up going to the public library when I was a kid. My mom was a school teacher and uh, a single mom, and so she was always looking for free things that we could do in the community, and so going to the
Mhm.
library was one of those things. So um, I grew up going to the library, and it was just kind of like for me, it was just part of life, part of what you have, like we have roads, we have a
Right.
bus to ride, we have the library, we have parks. Um, but then in my work, when I was doing community work, kind of social work adjacent work, um, it was really clear, like in communities where there weren't public libraries that were, available, easily accessible, um, it was just really hard for folks to get access to information, like good access to information about
Mhm.
health, self-help, small business development. And this was before like everyone had the internet in their house too.
Right. Right.
But even with the internet in your house, like being able to navigate what is good information and what might be misinformation
Yeah.
online. And so, and then when I was working in a community that had a really robust public library system, this was in Tucson, Arizona. Um, I was working with families, and the library was always the fun and safe place we could go. So there might be a lot of challenges or stressful things going on in a family's life, and we could just go, me as the family worker, we could go meet at the library, or I could take them to the library and the kids could play, and there would be, great books and movies and music for them to take home and share with their kids. But there'd also be support resources for
Right.
the parents too.
Mhm.
And I realized that that was where I wanted to work. I wanted to be able to work in a place that, the library was kind of like a respite for families, but also for people who are trying to learn something or maybe change their life or change careers. Or again, if you have like a health situation you want to know more about, the library was a place where people could go and get help and not be judged and not be charged a fee.
Yeah.
Because even if, we've got a complicated library system here in Oregon where we don't have big library districts like county districts where everybody
Uh-huh.
is serviced. Here in Lane County, we're serviced by the city that you live in, where you pay property taxes. So there's some people that are like outside of a library district. And so, the libraries are funded by property taxes. So it's a cost that we don't see.
Yeah.
Um, and so we do get people that might be outside of the service area and they're not able to check out books if they don't pay an extra subscription fee, but they still can access that information in the library. They can come to the
Right.
library, we'll help them, they'll get the information.
Yeah. Well,
So
you
I
raise a good example because I live in River Road area,
hmm
but I'm actually outside of the city of Eugene, and my library card now costs me $120 a year. Now, I can afford that, but a lot of people can't.
hmm
This raises an interesting question for me, though. It's not obvious to me. Is the dominant model for libraries a municipal based in the country, municipally based or county based?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um,
So,
so where I grew up in Arizona, it was the dominant model was county based. And then like, for example, in the Phoenix area, which is, Phoenix is the fifth largest city in the country, and there's a lot of
mhm.
suburbs. They
Yeah.
have a county system that served like all the small rural towns. And then,
Hmm.
individual cities might choose to charge extra property taxes, and individual cities would have their own
Yeah.
system within the county too, which sometimes is how it is, but it still covers everyone because no one's
Right.
like outside of the limits because you're always in a county
Yeah.
somehow.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's
So,
like you said, like it's an extra cost that people don't, like can't necessarily afford. But if it's in, everyone pays rent or everybody pays, their mortgage and the taxes are mixed into that. So it's a cost you don't see.
right. So, and what was the nature of the community social work you were doing before you directly entered the library? Were you a county social worker or?
So it was like social work adjacent, right? I worked for um the early Head Start program
Okay.
that
Yeah.
was in Tucson and Pima County. And that early Head Start was run differently than it is here in Oregon, where primarily a family visiting
Hmm.
system to support families. And then we would have like meetups with all the families, like maybe once a month. That would be kind
Oh,
of like a couple hours of preschool. Um, but there's such a high need for support services that all the 10 families in my caseload all had some extra circumstance that really put them at that was a challenge, whether
right.
it was the extreme poverty level that they were living in, or if there was like a baby with an extra health condition,
Mhm.
or something else going on in the family. And it was a voluntary program, but like families that might be referred to protective services were also like referred to our program so we could be a positive extra support
Sure.
to get families, to a good place.
And you mentioned doing some work in another country as well.
Yeah, I was in the Peace Corps in rural Nicaragua
Oh,
for
okay.
for a couple of years. So that was the first time that um like I really saw just how much we take for granted public libraries and being able
Yeah,
to like go get help and get information because
right. That's interesting because I would say my interest in social political activism began with a rural program in Guatemala long time ago, but
Oh, wow.
yeah. So okay, and let's see, how were you trained for your job? Do you have a library degree? You said you
Yeah.
have a bachelor's degree in Spanish. Did you learn on the job? Did you go to a library?
So I went back, yeah, so when I was living in Tucson and working for Early Head Start, the University of Arizona has a great library school there, with a special program that focuses on working with Latinx, Spanish speaking, and Native American communities too.
Mm-hmm,
And so I went to school there and got a master's degree in library science.
mm-hmm.
Um, and it's not like it a lot of librarian positions, they'll say a master's degree or, you know, similar experience. So it's not like you have to have a master's degree to get the job, but often if you don't, you're looking at somebody that maybe started in the library as a page and then worked up to another position, and has like years and years of experience of on the job training.
Mm-hmm,
Um, when I was in library school, I also interned at a community library, and then I was an on-call librarian for the big public library system there
mm-hmm.
too.
And that's you came from there to Oregon to the Springfield Library.
Yeah.
Okay. And you were hired specifically to do your work with the Latino population. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, okay, let's go back to the details of your job. Tell me in some sort of detail the kind of work you do. I mean, there are different ways to do this. You could tell me how you spend a typical day, or you could divide it up into the main components, however you feel comfortable talking about your job as a whole.
Sure. Well, um, a typical day can look very different
Mm-hmm,
day to day. Like if you look at a week or even a month and look at each day. Part of working at a public library, and it's not just the librarians, but also the um, technical staff too. We wear a lot of hats, especially at a public library like Springfield, where we have such a small staff, and
mm-hmm,
so we all do a lot of work to support each other in different areas. When I worked my first job in the very large system, I was at a branch, so you still like a neighborhood branch. So I still wore a lot of hats, but we had because we had so much staff, there was more division. Like for there, all the purchasing and collection development was done like centrally by people where that was their only job. Here
mm-hmm,
in Springfield, we're such a small staff that you do some of everything. So I do all the purchasing and collection development for the Spanish language collection. And at different times, I've also done collection development and purchasing for parts of the English language collection too, um, depending again on who we have as staff and what people's strengths are. Um, and then also, working in the library. So let's say, I'll give you an example. Yesterday was Wednesday. So my day started out with giving the bilingual Spanish English story time, preschool story time.
mm-hmm,
And then we were so busy yesterday because it's winter break. So
mm-hmm,
then the children's area was full. So I ended up staying out there, for like another hour, helping the children's desk librarian just interact with patrons and help them
mm-hmm.
because we were so busy. But then, as the Spanish services librarian, then I get all the translation requests. Um, we now have another native Spanish speaker, fully fully bilingual Spanish speaker on staff. And so we can share some of the translation requests, but um, that can be a lot of my job some days.
A
And right.
translation, let me ask you a little bit more about that. When you
Mhm.
say translation request, are you talking about a translation request solely about library business or
Mhm.
somebody who has a translation problem, like a
Yeah.
letter in English that they need to understand?
Well, it can be a mix. So yes, one, it's translating all of the library communications that
Right.
working on that into Spanish. And then the other bit would be like interpretation, like helping folks when they come in. So if there's a Spanish speaker that comes in and needs help, my coworker or I will be called out to help
Mhm,
them in Spanish. Sometimes we do get people in the community who come in with a document in English that they need to be able to understand. And
Mhm.
so we can help them with that. But, sometimes like if it's like a legal document, or we're not, like we're not notaries and we're not like certified interpreters, right? So we can like help them understand it, but we can't
Mhm.
give legal advice and we can't
Mhm.
um guarantee things. But that's often like all library staff, because we'll get people who want to look up a legal issue and we can show them where to find the information. We can help them, but we can't give suggestions or say, oh, well, I would do this or the law means this, we
Sure.
can't. We're kind of connectors. And then also right now the city, so we're located in City Hall, and the city planning department right now they've had Spanish speaking staff in the past, but right now they don't. So if they have somebody who comes into the permits office for a construction project or something, um, that speaks Spanish, I'll get called over to help interpret in
Mhm.
that situation. And again, that's where like, well, I'm not a civil engineer, so
Right.
I can explain what this means, but uh, do my best.
So that sounds like that could be a big burden on you to be called out to do stuff in other parts of the city rather than not connected to library work. So there's not another general infrastructure for translation in the city except for you folks.
Not at the moment. The police department uses a translation service on the phone, um,
Hmm.
like a professional translation service.
Yeah,
But if it's like the permits department for public works, we'll get called
right,
over to support. And they had, like I said, they have had Spanish speakers in the past that have worked in their department. They're in a situation right now where they don't.
right, right.
Yeah.
Okay, any other things about your day and your work that
Yeah. So part of my job is like running programs, like I mentioned, like the story time. I run a Spanish language book club for adults. Then there's also the serving, at the reference desk or the library card desk. So when people come
Mhm.
in, wanting to use the library, helping them. And then I also throughout the year do outreach. So I might uh, visit schools, or I might visit classrooms, especially like adult education classrooms,
Mhm.
specifically classes from Downtown Languages, which is part of Centro Latinoamericano, um, and just getting folks just like that. Those types of visits are connecting with people who might not know about the library or might not know what the library really offers. So going repeatedly different times to show and highlight different things that we can offer. Um, and like one of those things that like people may not realize is that you can check out a Wi-Fi hotspot at the library.
Mm.
Um,
Interesting.
yeah, so we have a lot of different things to support people. And then like if you're studying, we have online resources to help you if you're studying a
Right.
language or if you're studying for your GED or citizenship, so that can be a support to what you're already working on. We'll also, something that we've been doing in the past year and a half that's been really wonderful is there might be like a community event or a location where we can go and do a mobile library pop-up.
Mhm.
So we'll actually be able to sign up people for library cards on site. Often those have book giveaways for kids.
Do you have a
Um,
bookmobile over there?
we do not.
Uh-huh.
We just got through a grant a van that will help us. It's in the process of getting outfitted, but that will help us provide in a better and easier way, provide some of these small mobile library events, and we'll be able to eventually check out books.
Right. And in addition to the schools, what are the other main organizations that you liaise with? I don't know I live in Eugene, and a lot of
Mhm.
this is an education for me about Springfield. What are the most important Latinx community or fraternal or political organizations that you deal with in Springfield?
Well, there's like the service one that's not necessarily fraternal or political, the Centro Latino Americano, which
Yeah,
is both Eugene
yeah.
Springfield, and under that is Downtown Languages, which is their education classes that focused for adult learning.
Hmm.
And then Huerto de la Familia, which is focused on family garden projects that and also small business development.
Hmm.
And then I would say here, there's an organization in Springfield called Escudo Latino, which um, started with support from SAFER, the Springfield Alliance for Equity and Respect, which is the Springfield branch of CALC.
Yeah.
Um, and they're a really great organization for it's a grassroots organization that was started by Spanish-speaking community members here.
Hmm.
And they're a great way to find out about what's going on in the community. If we have something that they think is of interest to the community, they help promote that and share that with people. They also have um, will host, special programs, like they've done vaccination clinics,
Hmm.
and they promote nutrition support through local food box, sites. We've done some mobile library sites at the local food pantry that's at the Arc of Lane County that Escudo Latino was instrumental in getting started too.
Hmm.
Um, Yes, I would say that would be like the main like organization that helps connect people. I mean, they also do things that help support people when they have questions about, the immigration system or
Yeah.
knowing their rights.
So they
So,
sound like the most activist oriented of the, I mean, they're
mhm.
organizations that are clearly service oriented or specialty services in particular, but they sound like a broader activist. Well, when you said that they were the analog to Calc, that's why I,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and it's even more because they're like Safer is the Springfield part of Calc, and then Escudo Latino is like the specific that got support from Safer. That yeah, they're a really great way to connect with the community and just know what's out there and
Right.
get access. I
Okay.
would
Hmm.
say like there's a few other things that I do.
Go
So
ahead.
I talked about the collection development piece, right? Which is like a whole nother piece. And then because we're a small library, we wear a lot of hats. We don't actually have a marketing department or even a marketing person. Um, so same thing, like we don't have an outreach department or an outreach person. So like the outreach is part of my job, and I do that with some other folks too. And then like we have a marketing work group here that has different people from the library that help support the marketing efforts, and I kind of facilitate that work group. Again, like this is like an extra part on top of all the other stuff we talked about.
Right.
And then probably one of the highlights of my year, also something that, can take a lot of focus seasonally, is we have two really big events that we do in Springfield that are sponsored by the Springfield, like we're not sponsored, like organized by the Springfield Library and History Museum. And that's in the fall. We have a Dia de los Muertos. It's kind of like a month long of different ways
Hmm.
to participate in the cultural celebration that ends with a procession on the day, and some community performances of music and a
Hmm.
dedication of a community ofrenda that's in the museum. And then in the spring, we um, have a Children's Day Book Day, Dia de los Niños, Dia de los Libros celebration, which is like a family literacy celebration. And
Hmm.
it's been like this big kind of family kids fair we just take over City Hall, and there's
Hmm.
so many booths of different activities, and we give away books, and there's performances by local kids groups, like some of the elementary schools will sing, and local folklorico dancers, and of course the Springfield High Mariachi is like the highlight of the performances. So those are two times when the the library and City Hall kind of can become like a big community celebration
Right.
location, right? There's another time, there's a community group here in Springfield, called Comunidad de Herencia, that with Eugene Arte Latino has planned some other great events throughout the year. Like they do a Hispanic Heritage Month celebration at City Hall that we've been able to be a part of, but that's different. Like we kind of just show up and provide activities in the mobile library.
Tell me the name of that organization again. I'm curious about if they've done anything on the history of Latinos in the Springfield area, for instance.
Comunidad y Herencia.
Comunidad.
Comunidad y Herencia. So community and heritage. And Antonio Huerta is one of the main contacts for that. And they're the ones that put on the Noche Cultural that has been in a Willamette Park. It's in the summer. That's another great community celebration in Springfield of the Latino community.
Right.
Okay, so I think I really answered your question.
Yeah, you
Maybe
did.
more than you thought.
Well, you do wear a lot of hats. I see that. And how would you describe the special skills and personal qualities that you really need to do your job? What are the, I mean, clearly your bilingual skills, but how else would you describe the qualities that are necessary for you to do a good job?
Well, I'll start with the one that people think of when they think libraries, right? Because when people find out I'm a librarian, they're like, "Oh my gosh, I would love that. I love reading."
Yeah.
Which it's like that's just a small part of what you do at a public library, but there is the collection development piece, right? And so that's something that I definitely got the skills from going to library school and then on the job as well, combination. And since I do the collection development for the Spanish languages collection, I like to also joke with my friends that I never thought I would put my Spanish literature bachelor's degree to use the way that I do. But that's of course the purchasing of books, but also like reviewing your collection that's on the shelf and deselecting outdated or worn out materials. Trying to figure out what people want and what having that balance between what's going to be really popular and also but what people might need but might not be the bright shiny thing, making displays to promote the collection, just knowing the collection so you can help connect people when they come in. The Spanish collection development piece is a lot more complicated than English language because here in the United States for English language, we have a lot of review journals where librarians and other publishing, professionals will write professional reviews of books.
Right.
And it's really easy to read that and kind of get an idea what you want. And that just, there's not the similar in Spanish language. And then also when you're purchasing Spanish language, it's books from all these different countries.
Right.
Sometimes they're not available in the US. So there's a lot of, it's a lot of getting to know publishers and getting to know particular authors and topics and being able to make decisions based on like the little bit of information you can tell from a book without having a review of it.
Right.
A big thing that can help with collection development in Spanish is Guadalajara, Mexico has the Feria Internacional de Libros, so the International Book Fair, and it's the second largest book fair in the world, the largest Spanish language one, and it is huge. And I've been able to travel there a couple of times, and that's when you get to see all the books.
Yeah.
And talk to the publishers and then purchase them. And it's a way to get books that often aren't distributed in the US.
Yeah.
And the state of Oregon has some great supports to help, especially smaller library systems to go. There's a program called Libros for Oregon, and it's through the Oregon Library Association Reforma, which is the affiliate to serve Spanish-speaking Latino communities and libraries. And they have, there's a couple different special scholarship programs that can help small libraries send somebody to get books.
Right. Well, you've answered, I think, another question I had, and that was whether there's a Spanish language librarians association. You have an organization in Oregon. I imagine there's one nationally as well.
Yes.
Professional organization.
Yeah,
Right.
Reforma. So Reforma is it's both a national affiliate of the American Library Association, and then the state chapter is a part of the Oregon Library Association.
Let me ask you another, while we're on this question of collecting, let me ask you a question which is off center a little bit, but which is certainly contemporary in the United States. Of any of the disputes over library collections, disputes over how race is handled in children's books, or how sexuality or gender, it's really rattling the cage of a lot of librarians in school systems. Has any of that come up in Springfield? People saying, oh, you shouldn't have this book on the shelf.
Yeah, so you so we have a process where people can give feedback, right, about a book. I think that so, and we do have people who can give feedback. But we have a process, we have a collection development policy that goes into detail about all, the things I
Right.
kind of touched on briefly with you about how we evaluate a publication, and there's different review journals that we look to. And then in Spanish, even though there aren't reviews, there's different publishers that are trusted. And, like there's just a whole process to kind of vet your resources. And the part of the public library is providing information for all kinds of people, right? And so you might be from a family that has a particular way of looking at American history and the experience of race, but your neighbor might have a different experience. And so it's important, like if you're not ready to share with your child, you're not at the point where you want to share with your child a book maybe about for example, a book like The Indigenous History of the United States, right? There's a young people's version of that book that is written for like 12 and up to read, right? And if you're a parent and you feel like your 12-year-old's not ready for that, well, that's your responsibility and your choice and your privilege as a parent to interact with your child about what they read. But that is a book that's been written by Indigenous folks who are historians, and it's been published by a reputable publisher, and it's received great reviews. And the authors have won rewards or awards for things that they have written. And so that's something that we want to have, because there are 12-year-olds who are ready for that, and their parents want to share that. And so we have to have items for different people. Now, there are places, if you look at the collection development policy, like there are places where, we're not we're not going to have a book that denies the Holocaust, right? Because that's something that is misinformation, right? And so it's tricky, because there's that line between, well, what are people's opinions and what are they comfortable sharing with their families, and what is an outright
Right.
misinformation? Like, we know the
Well,
Holocaust happened.
right. Well, you don't need to convince me of that, but I'm trying to make a distinction here. Maybe there is a clear distinction in the disputes that go on in public libraries and the disputes that go on in public schools, where there is a school board, which is basically the interface with public opinion. I
Yes.
mean, right now, and you know this better than me, that school book purchases are centralized in the state of Texas, and Texas has been ground zero for library censorship in the schools for decades. And I'm just wondering whether this stuff has these types of disputes. It sounds like it hasn't really been an issue for you, or that people have accepted the vetting policy of the public library in a way that they haven't in school districts.
Well, and I think it depends on the community you're in and the library, so we do have this process and we'll hear people, but also we have our, like if they have a complaint, but it comes down to like, how was the book selected and was it vetted? And,
Yeah.
and I think you hit on something, like it has to do with the structure of the school board and how involved the school board is in making the decisions. How strong is the collection development policy of the school library? Because that can help a lot. Like if you have a really strong collection development policy that explains how these choices are made and has this process, you know, hopefully the school board, like they should be following that policy.
Yeah,
So it could happen, so, and you gave Texas is an example of it being a very different
yeah,
situation, and they have different selection criteria. It has been a problem in school libraries in other places too, and even some public libraries where the library advisory board, or maybe the county commissioners or the city council has a lot of um, might have a lot of sway in the day-to-day operations of the library, and maybe that library doesn't have a robust collection development policy.
right.
Yeah.
Okay. What do you find most satisfying about your work, and what do you find most challenging?
Yeah. Well, so one of the things we talked a lot about book collection, we were talking about skills, and I would say like this ties into what's satisfying for me, but the really important skill set that um, librarians, especially like public librarians, school librarians, need more than anything else is the interpersonal skills, right? Because uh, above all, we're a service job. People come into the library and they have needs, and they're looking for something, and we're there to help them, to connect them, to try to meet their needs in the way that we can with our information, with our resources, right? And so and then the other side of that, I've talked a bit with you about um, building relationships in the community and the outreach we do. Like so much of that is that people interaction. So you have to be able to have develop the skills and have the energy and be able to interact and connect with folks and listen and ask questions. Part of being a librarian is like what we say, the reference interview, but that's really just like when someone comes in and says, I need this, like, and then asking follow-up questions to get more information, right?
Mm.
Um, uh, like a funny basic example is like a mom comes in and says, I need books about whales. My child is doing a report on whales. And, you do the follow-up. Are they talking about the mammal, the sea mammal, or are they talking about the country whale? Which part? Um, but so for me then, like going back to your question about like what's most satisfying for me, I would say what's most satisfying for me is when we've worked together as a staff to make the library this welcoming, vivid community center where folks feel like they can come in with their questions and they're not going to be judged, and they're going to be greeted and welcomed, and we're going to help connect them to what they're looking for, to help them in whatever they're looking for, right? Whether it's
Mhm.
like they're in a really stressful situation and we need to get them something that will help them in that stressful situation, or they're just like an eager reader looking for their next book, like both of those. For me, when I'm connecting someone to something that leaves them satisfied with what they're looking to do, it's just really, really positive. um and I think the other thing that for me that I brought up with you is when we get to bring the community together for the big events that we talked about, like the Dia de los Muertos or the Dia de los Niños. Those are the most satisfying parts. I think for me, the big challenge is that it's like when you're helping people, when you're connecting folks, when you're listening and serving people, um, it's uh exhausting work in a different way, right? We're not building a house. It's not the physical labor, but it's it's work where um you're on in a different way than you would if you were just like sitting doing a desk job, not
Yeah.
always interacting with people. And I think the challenge definitely for us here in this community and also in other libraries, is that there's not enough money or staff to meet the needs of the public, right? So it's hard. How do we give, but also don't burn out and don't
And would
overextend our
you,
staff?
right, would you describe some of your labor as emotional labor for your patrons?
Yeah,
You know
for
what I
sure.
mean by that?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, what's the Springfield Library's policy on homeless people in the library?
Everyone is welcome.
Yeah.
So we have a patron code of conduct that, outlines what you would expect, right? That you're getting along with people, that you're not, you're not actively threatening someone, that you're not. So, I mean, as long as people are being respectful and following that, you're welcome. And I mean, you touched on another piece of libraries in our communities right now, where we're the place where people can spend the day, you
Absolutely.
know,
Yeah.
um, and get out of the elements, and where people and charge their devices,
Right.
access the internet, read materials, all of that. You don't need a library card to use our space and resources here.
Right.
We also have a few other ways to serve folks who might be in, transitional housing situations, or currently unhoused. We have what we call a transitional library card. And so we've worked with a couple different community organizations like Catholic Community Services in the past, and I think we're working at Carry It Forward, where basically the person, because those are both two organizations here in Springfield that serve folks who are without stable housing.
Mm-hmm.
And so basically those people can bring a letter from so someone who's without stable housing can bring a letter from one of these organizations that says, we are working with this person. They are currently without stable housing, but they are living here in Springfield. And then we
Mm-hmm.
get them a library card that's a temporary library card, so they can check out items,
Mm-hmm.
and sign on to the public computers with their card and everything. And it's just, the difference is that they're checking out fewer items than a full service card.
Right.
And because our limit on a regular card is 50 items, and that's kind of overwhelming if you're without stable housing to
Yeah.
take home 50 books. But also they just need to renew it more often. And that's
Right.
just because we know that they're going to be moving around. And so we want to make sure
Right.
that um, and then we also have a large collection of books, so that we call the Bring 'em Backs. And that's kind of like, you can imagine like a giant little free library.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and we have a collection that's always available out in the lobby of City Hall, because City Hall is open longer hours than the library is.
Right.
Um, and then also we have a big shelf, like a big, huge bookshelf, like rows, like a bookcase that's dedicated to this collection. And these are books that our friends of the library gets as donations. And they're books that people can take home without having a library card.
Yeah.
And we ask them if they liked it and they want to bring it back, they can. But it's also, if something happens to it, or
Yeah.
if they really, really want to keep it,
Yeah. You don't
that's okay.
expect you're going to get them back.
Right.
Yeah.
We do get some back, but
Sure.
they don't have to be. Yeah.
Couple, and do you allow people to sleep in the library?
We can't allow people to sleep, and um that's kind of a safety issue, because is someone sleeping, or have they passed out? Are they having a medical emergency? Like,
Yeah.
so we do have to wake people up. And we have people who have medical emergencies in the
Sure.
library.
And do you
So
have a full-time security person who circulates?
for City Hall, so it's for all of City Hall.
So it
Yeah.
covers City Hall and the library because you're
Hmm.
adjacent.
Hmm.
Okay. Um, the let's see. So challenges, not enough money, exhausting work. Anything else about challenges that we ought to know?
I think that's it, just having the staff and the resources to be able to meet the need without exhausting. Um, which I think, is probably what a lot of publicly funded services have been facing.
Sure.
So
Yeah. Tell me about your relationships with your coworkers and your bosses and with customers. Generally, is it a comfortable working environment there? Is it stressful? It sounds like you've described lots of very joyful experiences. And I know, being a person who loves libraries and loves to interact with books, I know what that's about.
Mhm.
Um, how about the chemistry amongst coworkers in the library?
Yeah, I would say overall, this is a really positive place to work. Um, people, most people who work, or most of the people who work at this library came because they wanted to work at a library, and be a part of what the public library offers to the community. Um, I would say that really, so what would be like lead to stressful interactions? It's usually, I mean, whether it's with a community member who's coming to the library, or among staff, it's usually because there's something else going on, right? Um, and I would say, like, the challenge that we talked about, it's also the challenge in making sure that, everybody is feeling supported in their work too, is that we just need more people and more funding.
Yeah,
So it's like we're just stretched thin, and so that can
right,
be a stressful situation. But I think realizing that the stressors come from the system and not from the person you're working with, that
right.
can really help. um
I mean, the
and
reason I asked so many questions about the homeless policy is that, I know, starting with what you said, it is a safe place for people to go, and it's warmer, and I think everybody should be able to go to the library. I also know that in the last 5 years, the Eugene Library has become a more difficult place to be. I mean, there's just a lot more volatility in who's in there, and it's really
Mhm.
cramped. And when COVID came along before the shutdown and stuff, between the homelessness crisis, which has been, escalating for 10 years for sure,
Mhm.
and the pandemic, the environment in the library over here is a little more tense than it used to be.
Yeah.
And I think that that would be difficult for librarians. I know I have a good friend college, from college, who I went with college to in Ohio, who was a librarian in Multnomah County, downtown branch of the Multnomah Library. And it just was towards the end of her career, it was very, very difficult.
Mhm.
Um, so that was the origin of those questions. So I
Yeah.
wonder if the environment has changed at the Springfield Library.
I mean, so I think there's a couple things. Like, one, I'm assuming you're talking about the downtown main Eugene Library as
Yeah.
opposed to the neighborhood branches. The nature of how the community in Springfield is, and I've worked for a big system, right?
Mhm.
That had like 30 locations in the huge multi-story downtown
Right.
and lots of branches. And there's a different feel. And even though we are the only library in Springfield, we feel a lot more like that neighborhood branch, like a big
Mhm.
neighborhood branch.
Mhm.
And so I think that can help in some ways. And uh the downtown Eugene Library probably gets more people that are in and out and in difficult situations because they're by that big bus station and they're the
Right.
big downtown location. Um, we do, I mean, sometimes we do have difficult situations, and that's where, like, we're all trained in de-escalation, and our security guards are too. And so there are times when we have to ask people to leave the library for the day. There's times where we have to ask people to leave the library and not come back for a month.
Mhm.
There's different, according to how the interactions go. Luckily, I mean, and that is um a regular occurrence, but it's not a daily or even weekly occurrence, right?
Mhm.
And luckily, the majority of the people who are coming to the library to use it as a place
Yeah.
are able to stay within the code of conduct.
Yeah.
Um, we do also have cahoots that we can call to help people with.
Sure.
Um, of course, they need more support too, because sometimes they take a very long time to
Yeah.
respond. And I would say like what has changed over the last 10 years that I've been at this library is we definitely do see more people who are in moments of crisis, right? And people who don't have a safe, warm place to sleep overnight, you
Yeah,
know. Um, Last night closing the library was like really heart-wrenching, because last night was the solstice, so it was the darkest night of the year, and also we were getting into the 20s.
yeah,
And luckily there's a Egan Warming Center that's just
sure,
like a
yeah,
block away from the library, but we had so many people, who were leaving 5-10 minutes before closing, and it's a way of checking in with them, making sure, like, just to make sure the center's open, but also I don't want to be like, a lot of people want to keep to themselves, so you don't want to like push too much too. Um,
yeah. You can't be too interventionist.
the other
I
thing
mean,
that we've
I've
seen,
been an Egan volunteer, so
oh, thank
it's
you.
kind of I haven't been doing it lately because of the pandemic, but I want to get back to it. But you have to have a kind of a nuanced view of how you deal with people, to be respectful.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
it takes a while to learn how to do it.
Yeah.
Um,
And that's something as a staff, like, you know, uh, we kind of will start with something more general, like, stay warm tonight, and then depending on how they respond, like the center's open. I think the other thing that I wanted to say that we've seen more of is folks who are um, trying that like need rehab. And this is like we see a lot of, because we're the place where people can go and you don't need to pay to come in, we see where some of the gaps are in our communities. And like somebody who is like, we've had people who come in who are in active detox and they've
yeah,
been released from the hospital, but not sent to any like support place.
yeah,
They can't get into rehab, and they need the support and the help and supervision, right? And again, I think it might be part of how people the expectations that people have, so like of what it's going to be like when you come into Springfield Library. And so like the times where it's been this, like we haven't had to ask anyone to leave, right? But you can see like where someone is like, they let us know what's going on, they need a quiet, safe place to sit, and they're like really trying hard not to be disruptive during this
right,
process, right? um so yeah, it's those are definitely challenges where
yeah,
you can only do so much, right?
right.
Because our system of support is not enough in this community.
If you look at how your job has changed over time, in addition to some of these sociological factors and the audience and the pandemic and the
Hmm.
um, well, now let me ask you about the pandemic though, kind of specifically. So, did you completely close down for how long?
Um, Not very long. I can't remember now. Sorry, I'd have to go look to tell you
And
because I
did
don't remember. But we started um before the summer of 2020 still. So it was still spring when we started a curbside pickup service. And we started a way for people to ask what we call personalized picks, where they can say, this is what I like, have someone just select items for me.
uh-huh.
Um, Even when we weren't doing curbside pickup, um, we were answering phones in the building so people could call, and we were doing reference on the phone and helping get people information and connect to things. I think the amount of time where we weren't answering phones was only like maybe a week, like that first week. And then we found a way to get shifts where people could be in the building by themselves to answer, because we didn't have a way to remote answer phones. So you had to come into the
So
library.
you were coming was everybody coming into the library or only some of you?
Only some of us in the beginning, and then once we started curbside, we had different shifts. So it wasn't everybody at once, but we would have, a small shift, and so the person answering the phones, and then the people running the books down to people in the
Right.
parking lot. Yeah, and I was assigned from the beginning Monday and Tuesday mornings to answer phones. Then we as much as we could, we heavily advertised that that was when you could call and get help from a Spanish speaker too, so people
Mhm.
knew.
Right.
Because at that time I was the main Spanish speaker on staff. If it happened again, we probably would have just been like, we would have been able to have more time because I have another staff, like I
Right.
said, a coworker who's fluent,
Any
and she's
other comments on how the pandemic has affected your job? And
um
did you feel safe?
well, in the beginning when nobody knew it was going on, everything was scary, and I think any situation would have been. I think that our staff worked really hard, like our management worked really hard to support folks. Because we're part of the city and there was the emergency operations center, so we were able to get, well, first we were wearing homemade cloth masks. But we were able to get supplies through that. I feel like we had, because of the connections and there's the city risk management, like I feel like there was a lot of serious work put to try to make sure that we were being
Hmm.
safe. In the beginning, when we didn't know what was going on, like we had to we would have so the library was close to the public, so we would have piles where we would, like, when people returned books, you'd leave them and have them sit for 3 days so that we weren't touching books because we
Yeah,
didn't know how it was spread.
we didn't know about contact. Yeah.
So there was a lot of effort made to help support us and make us feel safe under the best circumstances, and I think they did a good job of that.
Right.
I mean, as good as you could. It was all scary.
Yeah. So, in addition to some of the changes we've talked about, what about other changes in your job?
Hmm.
Technology, changes in responsibility, the
Hmm.
role of management and practices of your employer, changes in the industry generally. How
Yeah.
how would you how would you summarize the changes you've experienced in other aspects?
So I've been working in libraries for about 14 years, and there was like a big change before, I was in libraries, that started in the 90s, where there was a switch from analog to
Yeah.
everything being on the
So
computer,
you're
right?
all post-digital. You never had to
Yeah.
deal with the transition. I have
I
a
didn't. No, I mean,
yeah,
I grew up using the card catalog, in my
yeah,
first research papers for school, I had to
yeah.
use the
I love the card
uh,
catalog. They for a long time at the Knight Library. I don't think it's there still, but they had like put them over in like a isolated part. And sometimes I just go in there and just flick through them. But I have a cousin who was a librarian at Boston College, and he was there for the transition, and it was very, very difficult for him. This was, back in the 80s, I suppose, when
yeah,
they did it.
yeah,
But
yeah, I
yeah,
bet. Yeah, so I mean, it's good that I my work in libraries happened after the transition. I would imagine it would really change because the card catalog was such a physical way of searching as
yeah,
opposed to, online. Um, but I would say for me, the most exciting change I've seen in the 14 years that I've been working in libraries is the change in publishing. Now, it's been a very slow change, and I want to see more, personally, but we have more diverse voices now being published.
yeah,
And it is really wonderful to be able to walk into a library or a bookstore and see stories about all kinds of people,
yeah,
by all kinds of people, see picture books that show all kinds of kids and
yeah,
families. Um, when I was growing up in the 80s, it was like there were very few interesting books to read about girls, even.
right,
Like it was like so, like there was Alice in Wonderland, which was a classic, and The Wizard of Oz, also a
yeah,
classic. And there like was not, much at all. And I
hmm,
would say, I mean, it was like that for a long time because even if you look at the Harry Potter series, that's mostly a story about boys, right?
yeah, yeah,
And now, it's not just gender. it's just all kinds of backgrounds and all kinds of families, which is just so important. The other thing, I grew up, my parents divorced when I was 5.
Mhm.
And the the only story I remember as a kid where I saw a family that was divorced, that was also happy, that were just divorced, was one of the characters in the Babysitters Club, right? And that was like
Yeah,
groundbreaking, right? And so, I
yeah.
mean, it's just so important that we know that people come in all different ways and that we can
Mhm.
tell these stories. And
Yeah,
I think we still need more work to be done in the publishing industry, but it's been really exciting.
yeah,
And a lot of that has been pressure from the community.
right.
I think it was like, I don't know the exact time, I'd have to look, but it seemed like it was about 12 years ago. So I had been in libraries for a very short time. There was they started hashtag We Need Diverse Books, and there was a
Mhm.
lot of push by uh it started with BIPOC, I think, mostly BIPOC um librarians and community members, like pushing, like, we need to tell these stories, right?
Yeah,
And not just have the token author
yeah.
from a certain background.
Well, it must be very exciting for you to have a child come in, maybe with a parent or by themselves from some unusual background and be able to say, oh, yeah, I know some books that are about kids in that society, or
Hmm.
um,
Hmm.
and knowing that you can provide that,
Hmm.
you know.
Hmm. And it's, I would say when it first started, it was like anything that was that was not, a family that was white, cis heterosexual, like all that, it was like an issues book, right? Like the first
Right.
books about divorce were like the issues, like
The
all the sad things
Yeah,
you deal with, right? Or like if it's a book about immigrants, it's like the issues, all that. And it's like, it's so important to have joy and just show
yeah.
like normal life.
They're
And I
just
think,
regular, just people going about their business. They might just look a little different, but it's the common denominators of everybody's life. It's just different people. Yeah,
and it's not just important to see, like, it's so important to see yourself reflected, like you said, like somebody walks in and
yeah,
I can show books about them. Um, uh, it's that there's also windows, right? Like there's talk of showing the mirrors and windows. So it's important for people to see themselves reflected, but it's also important for people to be able to see windows into other ways of being as well.
uh-huh,
And so it's something that's really like part of why it's such an exciting positive change that it for me in libraries and the publishing world is that it's better for everybody if we have all these stories.
right, right. Very well said, Kristen. Um, okay, we don't have much time left. I want to turn a little bit to some labor stuff.
Hmm.
Uh, you're represented by a union at your
Yes.
workplace, SEIU.
Hmm.
Are you from a union family? Was your mom in the teachers union?
So I grew up in Arizona, which was a right to work state. I know now the whole country is technically that, right? So it was a different environment. And I can't remember if my mom was in the teachers union or not, because in education, the teachers union is also like the professional organization, right? They're kind of mixed.
Well, it's
Is
kind of
that?
it's a little more complicated. I'm gonna fill my coffee cup while I talk
Yeah,
to you.
yeah.
It's it calls itself an association, but over a period of time it morphed from being a professional association that didn't engage in collective bargaining to being one which did engage in collective bargaining. So it really serves both functions,
Okay,
as
yeah.
do many. There are lots of unions that do that. The nurses union is like that.
Okay, okay.
But yes, it's morphed more into has a bigger role negotiating for employees than it did. And in Arizona, which did not have public employee bargaining rights, it would be more of an association, which probably lobbied at the legislature for greater salaries for
Hmm.
teachers,
Hmm.
but was not able to actually negotiate with a school board, for
Hmm.
instance. So, and Oregon is about as opposite of that,
Yes.
as Oregon has a very, this is one of my fields of research was, but
Hmm.
Oregon has one of the most comprehensive public employee bargaining laws in the country. So at all levels, all
Hmm.
public employees, including police and firefighters. But so you're not sure about your mom. What about
Well,
was your dad ever a union worker? Do you know?
well, so saying that, I know my mom would get things from the NEA.
Yeah,
So, but it was more, it always felt more in the light of like a professional
yeah,
organization and
right.
not, um, no, my dad's a landscape architect and he had his
Hmm.
own business, so
Okay,
he was not
right.
involved. And then I starting, as a librarian. So I was also represented by SCIU in Arizona.
Hmm.
And, it was different than when I moved here because it was so here it was like you hear about it when you first like come on with HR and everything.
Right.
And there it was like after I'd already been on the job, a union member comes over and is like, "So, would you like to pay union dues? This is
Yeah.
how we can help." And I mean, I would say as libraries staff, there was definitely support for being in the union because we saw it was a very difficult time. So I came on in 2009 and then was full-time staff 2010. So we were still recovering from 2008. And the staff, they don't, I mean, you see the difference, like there's no step increases at all in that system,
Hmm.
probably because the union doesn't have a lot of, as much power as like here. And so like you're hired on and you're at the same salary forever. And they hadn't had even cost of living increases for like, it started before 2008, I think, because they were like, and
Right.
so it was a really difficult situation to be in. But that said, like the union still really so okay, there's no step increases at all in the system. That's just like how it is. They hadn't had a cost of living increase for like 5 years. Then they wanted to raise the amount that we had to pay for healthcare, right? And that was where the union like really stepped up and was able to keep our costs down and
Hmm.
also made it like got it so that we had some other like health savings account, like some other extra things. Like, so my experience was I was like, oh, it's so important to be part of the union because they're just going to try to take away from us as much as possible, you
Yeah.
know? Um, and it was interesting to, and it's a thing where it's like, well, I'm going to get the benefits whether or not I pay dues or not. So I might as well
Right.
support them.
Right.
And
Right.
then coming here, it's been really great. Working at the city of Springfield, our union has a really good relationship with the city.
Hmm.
I've been able to serve once on the bargaining committee for a new contract. And I feel like it's not adversarial. There's, well,
Hmm.
we're looking at making these changes because of this, and then the union can come back and I feel like there's been a lot of effort to really just, serve the needs of the city and serve the
Hmm.
employees. And it would be really hard to do that without the union, right?
Right. Right.
So, um, yeah, I would say, uh, I think folks here overall are really happy with the union. And I would say the other side of it, so like there's the side of where it comes to the contract and like our benefits and our rights and everything.
Hmm.
But there's the other side where like, so we have different departments and different microcultures within our departments, right?
Hmm.
And I would say the union is also like a really good support if you might have some kind of conflict going on in your workplace
Hmm.
because they know how it is in other departments and then also like across the state, right? So you can
Hmm.
know like, okay, well, we have this conflict. They can,
Hmm.
and talk like, so what could be things we could ask for to help solve that? And it's not, it's not contract related. It's like maybe interpersonal skills or
Hmm.
something. Um, they're just kind of like a great, I would say in that way, like a professional development resource where they can
Hmm.
help us have just a better workplace in all different ways.
Yeah. It's well said. So, and how active are you? Are you pay your dues, but are you active in the union and in significant ways or?
Well, I have two young kids at home, so I don't have a lot of
Mhm.
extra. So I'm not super active right now. I
I've been
have
there.
served
Yeah.
I've served on the bargaining committee before, and that's probably when I was the most active, right?
Uh-huh. And how,
So,
what was that experience like? Tell me what the experience being on the bargaining committee was like.
well, I would say
Or
it
did
was
it?
really positive.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, yeah, and we were able to um from that experience. So when I served, I actually, so I had like a 3-year-old and a baby at that time. And so I came from like a new parent with, who had just come off of parental leave,
Yeah.
and the a lot of labor laws are written in like kind of general, like the FMLA, for example,
Yeah.
right? So you have protected leave, and your workplace can decide to make you spend all your vacation time or
Hmm.
not.
Yeah.
Well, the city was interpreting that, requiring you before you went on unpaid leave to spend all your vacation time. So
Hmm.
you come back as a parent and you have no vacation time, and your child's always sick, and you have, and it's like, and like you need vacation time too
Yeah.
to be able to. So one of the things that I mean, you're just exhausted and you're not able to ever save anything up in your bank because you're always taking
Hmm.
care of a sick kid because they can't go to daycare. So one of the things we were able to get, just, I don't think there had been that perspective of being a parent of a young child in management or at the union table in a while,
Hmm.
because I came in and it was a bunch of people who were like close to retirement or in the process of retiring. So we were able to get in the contract that you can go on your protected leave and get to unpaid leave and keep a week of vacation in your bank and not be
Uh-huh.
required to spend it.
Right.
And that's not a huge thing, but
Yeah.
but uh
Oh, it's
that for me made
such
it
a
a really
great
positive.
example, though, and it's an example of why it's so important for a union to have like democratic means so that somebody can bring that to the table who's had the experience and say, this is a problem. And of course, that will serve new parents very well in the future.
Mhm.
And it's
Mhm.
because you had that experience. I couldn't give a better example of what a useful thing happening at the bargaining table than that. That's great. Great example.
Mhm. Mhm.
Great. Um, Anything else more you want to say about the union?
Um, I think we covered it pretty
Mhm.
well. Yeah.
Well, I'd like to wrap up, and I have the last question I have here is looking at your job or looking back on your career, do you have any additional reflections or observations about the work, what the work has meant to you and its impact on your life, or any other kind of final things you want to say?
Mhm. So I'm in a profession where people are drawn to it because we're passionate about it, right? We feel like it's fulfilling us in some way, and and we feel like, we're serving a purpose for the community. And so there's a lot of joy and pride wrapped up, in our work and what we can do. And so I mean, that's something that brought me to the field, and it's something that can, you know, encourage me, as because I'm like maybe halfway through my career, not even, like I have a
Hmm.
long time to work still.
Sure.
But I think one thing, like where I am at my point in life, like where I talked about, being a parent of young children, is that, I feel really, really grateful that I get to have the type of job that I can enjoy for the most part and that I'm inspired by, um, because work takes up such a big part of our lives. But then there's the other side of that where I am at the point in my life where I'm trying to find that balance and make sure that my whole life isn't work, right? Because I have these kids that are growing and changing, and this is,
Yeah.
just a blip in their lives. And
And
so
how old are the kids now?
now they're 5 and 8.
Hmm.
So it's for me, it's making sure that um work is just a part of my life and that I can develop and nurture these relationships outside, whether it's with my two kids, my family, my friends, um and just, it's a challenge, right? But making sure I have time to have joys joys and inspiring moments and loves outside of work.
Yeah.
So I guess that's it. I don't know if I don't have any big exciting
No,
closing
that
words.
was you've been very articulate, and I think that that's. I mean, the thing is, when I do that, I'm taking a few notes. It's recorded, but I've got like asterisks on a bunch of things. I'll tell you what they are that I really liked. I mean, I'm keep in mind I'm like figuring out what is this exhibit going to look like. But I
Hmm.
really like the way you talked about changes in publishing and diverse books for people.
Hmm.
And that
Hmm.
I think is really important, and something has happened in your field. I also really liked your take on your union experience and the relationship between the profession and the working conditions, and your example from the bargaining, the FMLA vacation time
Hmm.
thing. And
Hmm.
then the last thing she said about being at a moment in your life when you're trying to figure out a better way to balance your work and your life. I mean,
Hmm.
our children are 33 and 30 now, but I remember 5 and 8 really well. And I still remember that. So, um, and yeah, this was great. It's a portrait of a librarian, and it's also a portrait of a certain sort of perspective on the union's role in that and
Hmm.
work balance. So yeah, it was great. I appreciate your time. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to send this through the transcription program we have. Otter, have you ever used that?
Mm-mm.
It's a thing I can it'll transcribe this whole thing. Give me a transcript. Now I'll have to go back and I'll have to correct it. Won't get everything right. I'll be able to get a transcript. And we'll use that to think about what we include in the exhibit. And it might be some a small video clip. It might be just something that you said, but we'll need to have you sign a release about that.
Okay.
And
Hmm.
so I will follow up with that. Probably what I'll do is send it to you as an attachment and have you mail it back to us. And our timeline on this has shifted a little bit. We were originally going to try to have open this exhibit in January, but we've pushed it back a month to February 10, which is
Hmm.
it's the first Friday art walk in Springfield, and so I
Hmm.
guess that Maddie does some of her openings in conjunction with that.
Hmm. Hmm.
So she's off for the holidays, but when she gets back, she'll have these, and I'll be working with her on that. So it's Bob. Basically, it's Bob and I and Maddie
Great.
interviewing people. And let me just ask you last question. Can you think of any other people especially people who work for the city of Springfield who would be interesting to interview, especially if you know some non-white people? It's been kind of difficult identifying a more diverse group of people.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, the wood products people in the wood products industry are still mostly older white guys. Um,
Hmm.
you don't need to tell me now, but you could think about it a little bit. Want to make sure that our sampling is more diverse.
Yeah. Yeah. Let me reach out to, I'm going to reach out to some coworkers for suggestions.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, I have a call into the president of the local union about this too. I haven't heard back from her yet, but
okay. So someone who works for the city. Okay.
yeah, or for that matter, it could be somebody you come across in your work with the as a librarian who's
Hmm.
got an interesting job in Springfield.
Hmm.
Who's yeah, it could be a Latinx person who, oh, well, they drive a bus, or they work in the mill, or or I've heard a little bit about their story of how they got from Central America to here. And, doesn't
Hmm.
have to be a city employee. I'm assuming you're going to know more city employees, but your contact with the community. I mean, I'm thinking about checking in with the Safer or Escudo
Hmm.
Latino.
I
Um,
think the Escudo Latino would be a great great
Yeah.
contact. Yeah.
Okay.
Do you have a contact there? Do you know?
I don't, but if this probably through the Calc website, I can identify somebody if you want to send me a,
Yeah, I'll send you an
yeah.
email. Yeah.
Now I'm not bilingual. I dabbled in it. At one point I was headed towards that moment, but I didn't
Okay.
complete the moment. And so my
Okay.
Spanish is very rudimentary. Um,
Okay. Well, yeah, so I'll send you Mariela's email for Escudo. And I mean, one of my coworkers in the library, um, I don't know if you want it, if you want someone who's in a different department, but like she's been here for less than a year, but she came from the county, um, and she's from El Salvador. I mean, she I would imagine she would have interesting stories to tell because just
yeah.
bits that she shared with me. And then I'm thinking of somebody who's a community member who he's bilingual, so he speaks English too, but he works for Urban Lumber here in downtown. So they make
Hmm.
really beautiful high-end furniture out of reclaimed wood.
Oh,
And
interesting.
then he also has his side job where he is self-employed as a DJ.
Oh, that's pretty interesting. Yeah, send me
Yeah,
that. Yeah, that sounds like an interesting person.
yeah. So I'll try to get some contact info for you. So
That's
I'm
great.
glad you have until February. So
Yeah, well, we were really behind the eight ball on this, and it was good that Maddie had the flexibility because, frankly, it's been really hard. Well, now I appreciate you doing this week. I know holidays are upon us, and I don't want to ask anybody to do any more. I want them to just enjoy their holiday. But we also just had a difficult time identifying people. Um,
mhm,
it's Yeah, not everybody really wants to do it, and getting diverse people and getting sampling from all the different industries. We thought about some public employees. We need to have some wood products people because
mhm,
the old
mhm,
industrial base of the community, some warehouse
mhm,
workers. We need to have healthcare people, and we've
mhm,
done okay identifying some Riverbend people, but not Mackenzie Willamette, which I can't understand. So we're trying to locate people who are
mhm,
represent different parts of the economy as well
mhm,
as generational differences, well as racial
mhm, mhm.
differences, ethnic background differences. So,
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'll definitely, and Mariela might have some good suggestions too. The other person I can think of will too. So, my children's daycare provider, preschool teacher, so she's
oh,
Spanish speaking,
uh-huh.
and so she runs a business out of her home.
Hmm.
Um, uh, the and then her husband works with her as that to their certified family care place, but then he also has a side job where he repairs vehicles.
Uh-huh.
And then their daughter graduated from Springfield High, I think like 4 years ago now. And she works in the medical field. I can't remember exactly what. She's a tech, like a support tech. So I mean, I almost feel like she'd be really interesting because she's young. She's in her early 20s, but she
Yeah.
grew up here and is like starting off in her career.
Huh.
Um,
Well, all those sound like good suggestions, and when you send them, give me some pointers on how I should approach them. If I should say that you've referred them to me, I
okay.
want to make sure that I approach them in the appropriate way.
Yeah,
So,
I'll reach out and ask. Okay,
hey, thanks a
great.
lot.
Yeah, thank
It
you. It
was
was really nice.
great to meet you, Kristen, and you have a
Equally.
great holiday.
Thank you so much. This is a
Okay,
lovely
see ya.
conversation.
Yeah, bye
Bye.
bye.